Shavua Tov, Guten Woch. I'm going to tell story number 15 on the book of the Shivchei HaBaal Shem Tov, the praises of the Baal Shem Tov. And this obviously comes from the printed version of the book, which was put together by a Rab Dovber ben Shmuel, who was the son-in-law of the Rab Alexander Shuchat, of whom this story is told. I have mentioned many times that we have a manuscript, or there was a manuscript, I don't know, of Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi. He was the author of a book called Toldos Yaakov Yosef. So that is the first manuscript from which this book is taken. However, what we have is the printed version put together about 30 years later, in about 1810. So the story is told from the perspective of this Rav Dover, the son-in-law of Rav Alexander Shuchat, and here tells us, Reishis davar shamati mipi chotni. The first thing I heard from my father-in-law. This is Rav Dover speaking about his father-in-law, Rav Alexander Shuchat. May his soul rest in Gan Eden. My father-in-law, my teacher, Alexander Shuchat, he was by the pious Rav, the Chassid, the Kadosh, the holy man, Rabban Shel Israel, the teacher of the Jewish people in the Gola. Moreinu v'Rabbeinu, our master, our teacher, Moreinu Israel Baal Shem Tov, Memezibush. So Rab Dover is telling that his father-in-law tells him when he was by the Baal Shem Tov, She'aya etzlo sofer chet shanim. He worked by the Baal Shem Tov as a sofer for 8 years. כמה שנים קודם ביאת הסופר החסיד המפורסם רב צבי, which was quite a few years before the other sofer, the chassid, the well-known chassid Rav Tzvi, who worked by the Baal Shem Tov. ואחר כך היו שניהם סופרים, and then both of them, Rav Alexander Shuchat and Rav Tzvi, worked as sofrim, מחמת שהיה, let's go, because the work that they had to do was great, too great for just one person to do alone. An explanation given here is that the Baal Shem, not just the Baal Shem Tov, but Baal Shem in general, one of the things that they did to help people, they gave them what they call the kameot, which is to write a certain note with a pasuk, certain words from Kabbalistic knowledge that imply the powers of Hashem, and that was written in a klaf, in the type of parchment in which we write tefillin, mezuzahs, and sefer Torah, by a qualified sofer, scribe, and these commands were given to people to protect them from various problems, illnesses, situations. This is, some people still claim that they do this custom nowadays. The Rebbe said that we no longer rely on cameos, but this was done by the Baal Shem, and it was done by the Baal Shem Tov. He had not one but two sofrim who wrote cameos for people. And after that, this Alexander Shuchat was also given the work of Shochet and Bodek. He also became the ritual slaughterer, the Shochet for kosher animals, and Bodek to check that they're kosher, the meat is acceptable kosher according to Jewish law, because he had a problem raising his children. Apparently was an issue, had something to do with Parnasa. He had many children and he was not making enough of Parnasa being the sofer of the Baal Shem Tov. He also became a Shochet. And the Baal Shem Tov then gave him a position in the community of Sadeh Laban, of the white field. This is a nickname, Sadeh Laban, for the name of a town in Ukraine. The town was called Tserkov or Bielotserkov. Bielotserkov referred to the white church, since the Jews would not refer to the church as their point of identification of the town. The local Jews call it in Yiddish Schwarze Tuma, since we turn upside down the Avodah Zarah, so they call it Schwarze, meaning black instead of white. Tuma, impurity, for the Jews don't accept the impositions of foreign religious cult. And however, by the Hasidim, they took the name of the town, was already put in negative, and they turned it again, and in many books is referred to as the white field. Like the Tuma is nullified, impurity is nullified, so the town is called by the Hasidim the town of the white field, with the Hebrew name. So in this town, the Rabbi Alexander Shuchat is sent by the Baal Shem Tov to work as a shochet, and and then he went to a bigger city where the most of the population was Jewish, the city of Berdichov. And by the time he was old, by the end of the last few years of his life, the Baal Shem Tov gave him a letter to the Rav of the community of Nemerov, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi, Baal Mechaber Sefer, who is known as the author of the book Toldus Yaakov Yosef. Given that they are speaking about Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi in a third person, this story is completely compiled, not by him, but by Rav Dover ben Shmuel, the son-in-law. He marries the daughter of Rav Alexander Shuchat. So this Rav Alexander became the Shochet and the Bodek on the community of Nemerov, working under Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, doing the Hasidic Shchita for the Hasidim in that town. Shamati kama pe'am me'arav v'nizkar l'ayl. So I heard quite a few times, now is Rav Alexander talking about Rav Yaakov Yosef, that the Baal Shem Tov once told him in Shalashidus, in the last meal of Shabbos, Rav Yaakov Yosef tells Rav Alexander, remember what I heard from the Baal Shem Tov about you. What does Rav Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi says to Rav Alexander? The Baal Shem Tov once brought me in a trip to Gan Eden during the end of Shabbos. Baal Shem Tov had a spiritual trip to Gan Eden, to the Garden of Eden, and brought Yaakov Yosef to that place. הלכתי לגן עדן, והלכו עמי עם רב מישראל. A great amount of Jewish people came along. But as they were coming closer and closer to Gan Eden, fewer and fewer people were found, meaning they couldn't come closer to Gan Eden, fewer and fewer, until they arrived to the Etz HaChaim, to the tree of life, where only very few could come close. But even you, Sendril, I don't know the meaning, I saw you there. And you were standing behind. So the point was that the Baal Shem Tov said that this Rav Alexander Shuchat was able to come quite close behind him, all the way to the Etz Chaim, and it's a spiritual trip. It means, he has reached a very high level in the learning of Razei Doraita, of the secrets of the Torah, and the Baal Shem Tov was bringing him very able to see him coming very close. Rav Alexander Shuchat had a strange phenomena of deformity, if you want to call it that way, in his right hand, in the nails of his right hand. The nails grew twice, one in the root and one closer to the top. Like they will have one set of nails growing here and the other growing close to the top, twice. This happened because once the Baal Shem Tov had sent him to bring a kamea, bring one of his Kabbalistic amulets to somebody who was possessed and was experiencing madness. So when Alexander Shuchat brought the kamea, the Baal Davar, the devil, the demon that was possessing this person, jumped and grabbed the right hand that was holding the kamea, grabbed the right hand and scratched it against a wall and make his nails bleed to try to take them out. And then the nails became split, and that happened that he has one nail in the base growing into the finger and another nail on the top. Those nails that were in the lower part will grow and fall, but kept growing and falling, and the ones that were towards the top, once a week before Shabbos, Rabbi Alexander would cut them off. So when this happened, that this encounter happened, the person who was possessed was actually released from his possession. He was possessed by this demonic spirit and was released from it. But Alexander was taken by surprise by what happened and what happened in his hand. So he came to the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov asked him, "Did you get afraid? Were you afraid? You will not feel anything and you should not be afraid." And that's where the story stops. I had a hard time putting this together because this story seems to jump from one thing to another, and it's three things about Rav Alexander Shuchat. And what I think the message is, Rav Alexander Shuchat was a great chassid, a very dedicated man. He provided for his family. He also was close to the Baal Shem Tov, did very holy work, both in the writing of the cameos and being a shochet and making sure that Jews ate proper kosher food, for which the Baal Shem Tov had to trust that he was an Ira Shamayim. But the point of the story is the Baal Shem Tov told him, Ira Shamayim, fear heaven, but don't fear anything. Don't fear any unusual thing you meet in your life. Today, we don't rely on cameos and writing this type of writings, but we do get the message from the Baal Shem Tov even today. Even in our days, even the things we're meeting in our lives, in a general level, in a personal level, do not be afraid. Don't have fear from what happens. Something to internalize. A gute Woche, Shavua Tov.